Good evening. This was something unpredictable for me, and I couldn't expect that I have so many friends in Brazil. Well, some non-friends as well, which is not important at this point at all. Friends in Brazil. Some beams of light from Jerusalem reach Brazil. Well, naturally so. This country of well-minded and good-hearted people with a lot of joy and certain freedom in their thought. A few questions came to me. First, usually people ask about my biography, and this shouldn't be a matter of interest to anybody because, well, who cares what I did 20, 30, 40 years ago, or even 50 years ago? It can be interesting for my grandchildren, but other than that, I just can tell you I had some significant life experience in different fields. I know something about classical music, I play the piano, I know something about politics, right-wing politics, international politics, Israeli politics, of course, a lot of this sort. I have some ideas about the intelligence. I have some ideas about right-wing, radical groups, Russia, South Africa, of course, the United States, and first, Israel first. Now, this all maybe just makes our life easier in finding some common ground for further discussion, because we should look towards, not backwards. We should look for something in the future. Well, based upon certain experience, yes, it's important, but I'm not going to preach the past. I'm not going to preach any sort of self-satisfactory conservatism. No. The important is spiritual insight. What a person can attain in intellectual and spiritual realm. And here I'll just make a few points. Point number one. Here in Israel, we're not just living in a Jewish country, on the biblical land, not just the idea of chosen people in terms of a very special history. No, it's much more than that. If we will talk ever about Israel, we will have to realize two key points for our further discussion. One point is the exile of Israel and the return of Israel to the land. This comes from the first chapters of Bible with Abraham and goes through the whole book of Bible, through all the prophecies, as something very central. Because it's not just about the Jewish people. It's not just the manifestation of certain history, of certain ancient nation. No, this is the message of God to all mankind. The message of messianic redemption, more than that. Even much more than just messianic redemption. You can compare it with Adam's exile from the Garden of Eden and the return, the messianic return. But it's more than that. On the side, we can also remind that for at least 1500 years, certain parts, if not all, most, or half, will not go into this, of Christianity declared, you Jews don't go back home until you accept our faith. We did not accept their faith and we got back home. This was God's decree of the God of history. Simply. Very important point to discuss. Explains a lot about what's happening now in the Christendom in general. Israel, together with Kabbalah. What is Kabbalah? René Guénon explained it in a very precise way by translating the word Kabbalah as tradition. This is the ancient tradition. The book of Zohar, the book of Yetzirah, Bahir, etc. Hechalot. This is the ancient teaching about the world, which includes, of course, the creation of the world, cosmogonical part, which includes meditation, divine prayer, reaching of God through prayer, meditation, and the teaching of redemption. This is all there in the Kabbalah. We can discuss it in length. Also, this ray of light coming from Jerusalem reached such great individuals as René Guénon. Many of you know of him, and Sri Aurobindo. René Guénon comes more from the left side, not in political sense, of course. René Guénon was rather a right-winger, relatively so, but meaning he was very critical in his approach to everything. His way was to ponder, to think, and then he got to, of course, the higher spiritual stages of development. He was a great man, great man. His teaching was totally based on what Kabbalah is about, really. René Guénon. And he knew Kabbalah. Alongside with the Indian teaching, of course, he was also a Mason for a certain period of his life. Of course, he comes also from Catholicism. And of course, spiritual Islam was an important part of his life, especially the second part of his life. He spent a long period of his life in Egypt, as everybody knows. A very special person who gives us unexpected, I would say, wide tools of looking into the world. The tools are so wide that you can reach every single point of the world where we live with his intellectual and spiritual tools. That's exciting. I give lectures on Guénon. We can discuss it further. And of course, Sri Aurobindo. Unlike Guénon, Aurobindo didn't touch the books of Kabbalah. He came to the full bliss of truth, mostly from the right side, we can say it, if you understand what I mean, only in spiritual terms again. Following almost totally the teaching of Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzat. Exciting. You can see the writings compare, and well, Luzzat was, of course, 200 years before, but you see how great minds think alike. Aurobindo never touched any book of Luzzat, of Kabbalah. The truth is in the oneness. The Spirit can come to you when you're in India, and he was based first on Western culture and then on Indian traditional, and then the Spirit came to him. Sri Aurobindo can be reached and accomplished and comprehended by René Guénon. But the source is here. The source is in Israel, with today's great rabbis like Rav Mordechai Shrik and others who carry this torch of the real tradition, true tradition, spiritual, intellectual. Join us. Now, again, I was so much surprised to hear from Brazil that people want to communicate. Be blessed from Jerusalem. Friends, be blessed from Jerusalem.